Hello, and thank you for listening to the very first episode of Killer Influence. My name is Alexa Ray, Community Manager at Media Whisper, and I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Will Barton, Marketing Specialist at Media Whisper.
Hi guys, super excited to be a part of this podcast. Today we're going to be introducing Brandon Brown as our first guest. But before that, we would like to share our background with you and how we ended up in Music City. Hi guys, this is Will Barton and one of the co-hosts for the Killer Influence podcast. I was born in Melbourne, Australia and lived there for all of 26 years and was working in online marketing for a variety of independent artists in Australia and really had a huge passion for music and online marketing. So I worked there and then I decided to change it up a little bit and make a move to London, England. So I lived there for a number of years, also working in music marketing for a company called BMG. I had a really big passion in email marketing as well, so worked for an agency there, working for corporate brands like BBC and Adidas, and decided again that I wanted a change of scenery. So I decided to move to Nashville, where I now work for a company called Media Whisper.
I'm super excited to have you here with me, Will. My passion for music also brought me here to Nashville, specifically country music, but I definitely don't discriminate. I love all types of music, and Nashville is definitely full of it. I moved to Nashville about 6 years ago, and I love it. I went to Belmont University and earned my degree in music business. And after graduation, I started working at a publicity firm for some big-name country artists. And after working a few years in PR and running the company's social pages, I just noticed that I really loved being on the social side of things. So now I'm really passionate about working at Media Whisper and venue marketing on social media while assisting with social media for nonprofits. And now here's the moment you've all been waiting for. We'd like to introduce you to our first guest, co-owner of Media Whisper and guitar player for the touring band Veridia. How does he do it all? You're about to find out.
Thanks for joining us, Brandon Brown. We're excited to have you as our first guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
How does it feel to be the very first guest of Killer Influence?
It's a lot of pressure, I feel like. Will this make or break your whole podcast? I hope not. I'm happy to be the guinea pig. Thank you.
Awesome, and thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us. We know how many plates you're spinning at all times, and we'd love to hear the history of how you got into marketing and being one of the co-founders of Media Whisper.
Sure. Yeah, what do you guys want to know? I have a long history with a lot of different phases of life. It's been an interesting road, so I'm an open book.
I think we should start off about how you got started. So was Media Whisper the first step, or what led you to Media Whisper?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Media Whisper is a social media marketing company, so that obviously was not around like when I was first coming up in school. My first opportunity that kind of got me into marketing was in high school. I was part of a ton of street teams, and street teams are not normal these days, I guess, but I literally helped promote hundreds of bands and tours for free, really. I would just sign up for these things online, and every day or every other day for a long stretch of my high school life, I would receive a new package in the mail full of cassette tapes that tells you how long ago it was, stickers, CDs, just to distribute at school. So I was like the free stuff guy in school, and it was great because I got to know everyone. I had so much free stuff that I literally had to give it to everyone at school to avoid always handing it to the same people. So I kind of floated between all the friend groups and, and all that stuff. Eventually that led to me getting paid to do that same type of work. I would put up displays in record stores, and we still had a ton of those, promoting tours and bands, new releases and movies and all kinds of stuff. And that's really what turned me on to marketing as a potential outlet or a job, I guess, being able to connect with the people side of business and like give people something that they want, whether it's free stuff or, whatever that might look like. So when I went into college after that, I wanted to major in music business, but the school I went to didn't have a music business program. So I majored in business and minored in music, thinking, I'll just create my own music business degree. That didn't really work, but the two never intersected at all. But my senior year of school, kind of fast forwarding, I got an internship with Southwest Airlines in the marketing department. So I kind of knew, marketing was where I wanted to go. I went to a career fair that was on campus, and on a whim, as I was walking out, I saw that Southwest Airlines had a marketing internship for the time of year that I was specifically looking for one, and just, kind of threw my hat in the ring and got that. And that was definitely a life-changing thing. I'm so glad I did. So ended up getting hired at Southwest Airlines right out of school once my internship completed, and fulfilled several roles, in different teams at that company. And then about 5 years later is when kind of stepped into my current role, left the corporate world to co-found Media Whisper. And I guess that's why I'm sitting here today.
Wow, who knew that Street Press would have you co-founding your own company?
Yeah, I was a 14-year-old kid, walking into record stores. Maybe I was 16 by the time I was doing that type of work, because I'm pretty sure I would drive myself around, and I'd be talking to the managers or standing outside of arenas, when a show got out, and handing out the most random swag, you could think of. Like, I remember for some company, I was promoting George Jones, and I literally had a box full of like 2,000 George Jones bookmarks. And that's what I had to give out outside of George Jones's concert in Fort Worth, Texas, And I mean, it was always a different kind of assignment, but it was fun for me. And I got to talk to people, and, I've always played in bands as well. So learning how to promote that without pissing people off, I guess, making them actually want to come to a show, not just want to throw away a flyer that you handed them. There was a lot of kind of creativity that went into that, like throughout my other career, which was in the music, performing in the music industry as well. So we could get into that or not. But yeah, marketing's kind of been like this ever-present thing in my life in different capacities.
While you were at Southwest, were you thinking about the music industry and, my passion's with music? How did you handle that?
It was interesting. And one of my old bosses there kind of pulled me aside one day. He's like, I don't know how you do this. He's like, you crunch numbers all day and then you write music all night. He's like, I don't know how you switch between those two worlds. So for me, they really were two different worlds. I wasn't sitting at the airline thinking about, how can I launch this into a career in the music business, even though that's what I had wanted to do years before. To me, like, music and business have always kind of lived simultaneously, but on completely different tracks, on my life. And they just happen to follow each other, but never really intersect. So I was always pursuing music, but as a creative outlet, not as a career path necessarily back then.
Awesome. So tell us how you went from Southwest to Media Whisper.
Yeah, it was an interesting road. When I was at Southwest, towards the end of my career there, I had been helping my now business partner, Michael, with kind of keeping his business in order, just as a friend, through different connections at Southwest and kind of little opportunities that popped up here and there. I had actually started like a small business or two on the side. None of them ever went anywhere. One was like a clothing company that had a little bit of headway, but I never really pursued it seriously. But in kind of walking through that process, I had learned how to establish a business, file it with the Secretary of State, file it with the IRS, sort of making a business entity official. And my good friend at the time, Michael Henry, he had started doing some social media marketing. This was back in the MySpace days. So he was managing MySpace pages for some of the House of Blues venues, starting with the one in Dallas, which is where we lived. So I would help him just on the side with like invoicing, business structure type stuff, pretty much making sure he didn't get sued or audited, just as a friend. I helped a number of friends set up businesses because I was like the only guy that in our friend group that knew how to do that stuff, and then after about a year or two of that, sort of the predecessor to Media Whisper, which Michael had been working on, had grown within the House of Blues system. It had spread from MySpace to Facebook to Twitter. He was working with not only House of Blues Dallas, but I think half a dozen House of Blues venues at that time. And then their parent company, Live Nation, realized, hey, this is 2010 now. Social media is here to stay. Not only do we need to be on it, need our venues to be on it, but we need some consistency, some strategy, and really no one again, this is Live Nation saying no one in our headquarters or our office really knows how to do this, but who's this guy in Dallas? He's already working with half the House of Blues on social media. Maybe he wants to do it. So they asked Michael for a proposal, and that's when we decided to partner and really make an effort of this. And we established Media Whisperer in its current form and negotiated a deal with Live Nation while I was still working at the airline. It was just kind of an after hours project, really. And I wasn't going to leave my nice corporate job with free flights and all that stuff without some security, sort of a safety net. So essentially, once we negotiated the deal and got a signature on the dotted line, I put in my 2 weeks notice, and that's when Media Whisper started. So to answer go back to your previous question, like I was still playing music at the time. So on the weekends, our band would go out and play shows. Like I mentioned, I had free flights thanks to working at Southwest. Great job benefit. I could fly out and play shows. But I knew that pursuing music and sitting in a cubicle couldn't coexist forever. And so when this opportunity to pursue Media Whisperer and partner with Michael came up, that was another sort of push behind that. It wasn't just like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. It was, I want secure income while also being able to pursue music and tour and really like give that the opportunity that it deserves. And so that's sort of the long-winded answer of how I went from the airline to what we do now.
Amazing. So when you started Media Whisperer, it was just you and Michael. You slowly built a team, and how did that work? And what was the process around that?
Well, when we had initially pitched the idea of Media Whisperer to Live Nation, we aimed pretty high, but back then no one knew what social media was worth. People were pricing it, and still people price it all over the board.
I was just going to say they still don't.
Yeah, right. And so, now like we're in the agency world, and there's different tiers of agencies, and sometimes we'll, call on a prospective client and they're like, oh, I can have someone do this for X amount of money. I get the calls all day long. We're like, well, that's true, but in a sense, you get what you pay for, and so back then it was even more of the Wild West where people were charging $100 a month, and working with any frozen yogurt shop on the street corner, up to, full service agencies, full on production houses that were charging thousands of dollars a month. But at the corporate level, there wasn't this understanding of the value of social media. You weren't really able to track revenue back to those activities as easily as you can today. And so anyway, we aimed, pretty high, thinking, oh, we know what this is worth. We know how much value we can bring, and we know, we need this many people to handle X number of music venues, from a community management perspective. And we negotiated down from there. So it went, in our minds, we're going to have an office, we're going to have 6, I don't even remember what we wanted, 6 employees or 10 employees or whatever. And then eventually when we did kick off the relationship, it was like we had whittled it down to a skeleton crew. It was 4 people, including Michael and myself, working from the sofa in my apartment at that time, drinking free coffee from the apartment lobby and just listening to like dubstep all day long. And that's how we started the company. And, we really had to prove the value of social to the corporate side of that industry and sort of come up with a strategy and create a strategy that could be iterated to dozens of music venues with the handful that we'd been entrusted with. We've just continued to grow from there. I think in the first year or two, the value was proven very, very quickly, especially once we were able to start tracking revenue from revenue generated specifically from social media activity. Then a lot of the question marks were removed.
What types of things did you do to prepare yourself for this? You guys literally went from, nothing to gaining Live Nation to believe in, your social media services against all these other people that essentially could do it better. How did you guys pull it off?
That's a great question. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. It was an experiment for both sides. It was an experiment for us. It was an experiment for Live Nation to trust an agency, much less to 25-year-old guys in Dallas that they'd never met before. But I think it was Michael's history, of a couple years of working with the House of Blues venues, creating Facebook pages for a handful of them, creating Twitter pages, creating MySpace pages back then. Our first contract included MySpace community management, you know? So I wouldn't say we just figured it out as we went. There was a lot of context that led into that first contract, but we continually do have to figure it out as we go, simply because the platforms change so much. I think the great thing about our agency and the way we work, you know, we don't really believe that one size fits all. Like, we're always tweaking things. We're always changing best practices in order to coincide with the best practices of, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, themselves. So it's a constant evolution. And back then, you know, that was even more true than it is today. I think everything was just changing. The understanding of social, the role of social within marketing programs was just growing by the day, you know, and now people understand the value. Now it's more about fine tuning the tactics and tools. Back then it was creating that from the ground up, or experimenting with a lot of tools that other people were creating. And, you know, whether they were good or not, we didn't know till we got in there. We do have a lot of systems, some of which have been around since probably year 1 or 2 of the company. We started realizing, oh my gosh, you know, this music venue has 250 shows a year. There's a million things that we could post about each day, not only to sell tickets, but just also to have an engaging social media presence for this particular music venue. But much like a newspaper can only fit so many articles or words on one page, we wanted to treat the social media accounts the same way, where we didn't want to try to cram every piece of content we had into every single day, but to space it out, to be more strategic, especially once Facebook, you know, turned on their EdgeRank algorithm years ago. Like, that strategy became a necessity, not just a good tactic, a healthy tactic. So there are some things like that. I mean, that's one example. But yeah, systemizing it, really any type of business, I think, is the only way you can scale and bring other people into the equation. If we were just winging it every day, I think everyone would go insane. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. There are certainly other tools and processes that we've done away with over the years as well.
I love that he's our first guest, because not only is he a creative, he's also focused on being analytical. And typically people either lean towards one or the other, but he's both musician and brains. I just love it.
I appreciate that. I don't know if it's good or bad. But it's the only way I know how to be. Like I mentioned, you know, even back when I was first getting started in the corporate world, or maybe back in college when I was majoring in business, minoring in music, is like, if both sides of my brain aren't engaged on a normal basis, I just don't feel like myself. So I would say I err a little more on the analytical, strategic side, and kind of moonlight as a creative, and I can speak that language and step into that space. But, you know, kind of the role that I fill with our agency is very operational. And so I have to kind of be in that analytical, less lofty mindset a lot of the time. But I do really cherish those moments when I can step into the creative side and really embrace that as well.
Of course. And can you suggest 3 apps or books that have inspired you for the people who are listening to this, that are wanting to get into maybe marketing or social media or entrepreneurship? How do you stay in the know, Brandon?
Every day. Honestly, podcasts are a big one for me. So that's why I'm so happy to be here kind of contributing to a podcast, because I listen to them nonstop. I mean, there's a number of them that are regulars for me. I'm trying to think back through books, business books that have been really helpful. You know, there's one actually I just finally read last year. We talked about Southwest Airlines. It was co-written between Colleen Barrett, who's the president emeritus, definitely an icon in not only the airline industry, but just among businesses everywhere. It was called Lead with Love. You know, something that when we started the company with 4 people sitting on my sofa, you don't necessarily think about, at least I didn't think about back then, was company culture. You know, I mean, the culture was we hang out, 4 guys drinking coffee, listening to music, you know, and just we happen to also be working away at social media all day, every day.
It's probably the best environment to have.
It was great. It was great. It was my apartment. I didn't have to go anywhere. Coffee was free, you know. I loved all the guys, you know, that had kind of started this from the ground up. So Lead with Love, I read that in an effort to just kind of remind me of the leadership perspective of people like Colleen Barrett. I mean, Southwest Airlines is legendary for their style of leadership, how they take care of their employees, just the culture that they create, and everyone really embraces. And having been a part of that and seen it firsthand, I can say, it's authentic, it's legitimate. It's not just something that you write about in a case study or read about in a case study, or that they publish books about. Like, there's something magic about the culture there, and that's not created by accident. And I realized as our agency continued to grow over the years, and we went from 4 employees to 8 to 12 to now close to 20, it's like a culture was developing whether I was directing it or not, because the more people you get in the office, as we grew from that apartment, to a real office, and now we're in our second office here in Nashville, the culture is going to take shape simply because you have a community, you have people hanging out, sharing a common experience, working. And I didn't want that to just happen by accident. I didn't want it to happen without guidance, so that was a valuable book for me, just to kind of bring me back to the lessons that, I saw lived out on a daily basis in Southwest Airlines. And I'm very thankful for having had that experience, but it definitely wasn't, part of the initial kind of seed of our company. And that was something that was missing for a couple of years. So that's a great one. Talking about systemizing, there's a great book called The E-Myth, or The E-Myth Revisited. The whole focus of that is creating processes so that you can hand, the book of your company to another person and trust that they will be able to follow your processes. I think that's something we're still working on here. Like I mentioned, social is constantly evolving, so that toolkit and that guidebook has to continue evolving as well. Something that we wrote years ago is not still relevant today, so that's sort of an ongoing thing, but I think that's a very valuable lesson for any small business person to read, regardless of the industry that you're in. And a third one, I don't know. Might have to get back to you on the third one.
That's okay. So we've heard a lot of positive things that happen in your career. What about the failures? What would you say kind of shaped you or maybe scared you a little bit? Did you and Michael get into a huge fight ever? Even if it's with music, did you think, should I really stay in the band? Yeah.
So that's something maybe we haven't mentioned yet, is I do still play music,
And it is Veridia, right? Where can we find y'all?
Yeah, the band is called Veridia. Shameless plug. VeridiaMusic.com, VERIDIA. That's what led us to move the company to Nashville, actually, because we started both the band and the company in Dallas. And Media Whisper back then, we didn't have an office. Everyone, once we stopped working from the sofa in that particular apartment and hired a few more people, everyone would just work from coffee shops or from home or whatever, but we never had an office. So it was very easy for us to move the company, quote unquote, to Nashville, which was a result of the pursuit of music. So I was negotiating a record deal at the time and decided to make the move. And that could be viewed as a huge success, getting a record deal, making the move, whatever. But there was a lot of drama that happened around that as well. Once the business side of music kind of came more into the picture, that fractured a lot of the casual hobbyist side that had brought the initial band together. And I won't get into the nitty gritty there, but that was a really tough time. And the company was really Media Whisper was really the only thing going well at that time. I had, a few things, the band breaking up in the middle of this record contract, that we were negotiating, a relationship ending at a poor time. Also, our band all lived together in a house, which has its own drama and was probably worthy of a reality show. But the house was out on a couple acres in the country in Texas. And we had a few days of rain, and our septic tank flooded back into the house and destroyed almost all of my stuff. So all that happened within about a 2-week period. So it was out of that and all that change is when we decided to move to Nashville. So we still, ended up negotiating this record deal, and that led to great opportunities with music, but it sort of came out of this, train wreck of a situation. So
interesting. What do you think are the big differences between Dallas and Nashville in your mind?
There's a ton of creative people in Dallas, for sure. And there's a ton of creative businesses in Dallas, too. From a music industry standpoint, there are a ton of talented musicians in Dallas, but there's very little industry to support them. So, the answer is kind of twofold. I think a company like Media Whisperer, we could have easily stayed in Dallas and it would have been a great home base. But on the music career side of my life, the industry was here to support that pursuit. And in Dallas, I just felt kind of hitting the ceiling almost, where if we were going to take a step to the next level or whatever it may be, like we needed to make a move like that. Here, there are labels based here. There are publishers based here. The PROs are based here. There's tons of songwriters making a living by songwriting here. In Dallas, there are some really great talented producers and studios, but from an institutional standpoint, management, labels, publishing, that's a huge difference. That's really the history of Nashville being Music City. And that's why a move here, seemed so necessary. And it was a risk, of course, leaving family, leaving friends, moving, a couple of us simultaneously out here, but it was a risk that paid off, but still, to go back to your question, Alexa, like I'm never fully comfortable. I'm never fully feeling secure. I think anyone who's probably started a company, even growing it to a certain level, or anyone who's pursuing, music, those are both risky pursuits. And it's, sometimes I wonder like, okay, I have all these plates spinning, different things I've pursued or built or whatever, and they've seen success, but like having successful milestones doesn't ensure your success forever. And that's kind of the phase that I'm entering, just personally from a mental standpoint, is just how do we secure what we're doing right now and really set it up for success for the next 10, 20, 30 years? How do we create systems within the agency here, even in an ever-changing sandbox like social media? How do we establish systems that allow us to continue to grow and scale, and allow me, honestly, to be able to hand off some of the responsibilities that I had to fulfill when starting the company, to allow me to move on to more of the higher level business development and strategy, things like that.
Right. How did you see through these goals? A lot of people have a hard time sticking to one. It seemed like anything that you wanted to do, you just went for it. And would you give any advice on that, on how to, still continue to do music, start a company all at the same time? How did you stay sane through all of that?
I don't know if I have stayed sane through all of that. Sometimes I seriously wonder that, actually. I think you have to be a little crazy to start, something great. Not that you don't go in without a mission, but for me, like the driving force behind any risky decision that I've made is I sort of hit this crossroads where I realize, like, am I going to look back at this moment when I'm 50 years old, when I'm 60 years old, and wonder, what if? And I don't want to do that. I want to know that if something that I was interested in and something that I had really purposely thought about, that I could take a calculated risk and know that I wasn't just jumping in. You can always start over. I don't have kids or family or anything like that. I think that can maybe change the equation for some people. But if you can honestly look at a situation and think, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? And can I recover from that? That can give you a lot of confidence. But I've never stepped into a zone or an opportunity that I didn't have some type of knowledge around, or hadn't had good counsel around me, people who were already experts in that field, to kind of learn from. I think having great mentors and just a supportive community, friends, family, et cetera, around me, that gives you a lot of, makes you feel more steady on your footing as an individual, so you can step into situations like that and not feel like you're going to go crazy.
I agree. And who are your mentors right now? Do you have any mentors that you go to for advice or just daily guidance for the things you're doing?
There's certainly people like that I view as inspiring, like a Colleen Barrett. And honestly, a lot of the people that I reported to directly, back when I was in the corporate world, I look back now and realize, like, wow, those were great leaders. I've had a lot of great leadership examples in my life, from my parents, from opportunities that I had in high school through some leadership programs that I was a part of, jobs that I had in college where I was trusted, as a leader. So there's a lot of great examples in my life that, you know, I look back now and realize, oh my gosh, like I was probably bound for something, you know, being able to manage a team or to lend, you know, knowledge to other people. I've been poured into by other people in that way, and I want to be able to do that to others as well. So that's, you know, a goal of mine, is to just continue to step more into a leadership and mentorship role. Yeah. And honestly, right now I have a great community of friends around me, many of whom are also entrepreneurs, some of whom, you know, I've seen just skyrocket into success with their businesses, and learning from them, you know, along the way, and just learning how to take some of those lessons back to what we do at Media Whisperer, to better ourselves. You know, we started this company, we were 25. I think Michael was 24. So 8 years later, you know, I still am young and, you know, feel young, and that's not where I'm going with this, but like, there's just a lot of lessons that you learn in 8 years of life, especially between 25 and 33. And especially when having a company, you know, that you're responsible for, that is also providing a livelihood for a team of people. You just have to be learning at all times. And I'm constantly seeking mentors as well. I don't have one person, you know, that's that trusted older kind of stereotypical, you know, sage wisdom-esque figure in my life, but I do have a great community of people that are very open about their experiences, their pursuits, their struggles, and we're all just learning from each other. So I'm thankful for that.
That's great. Thank you so much for this inspiring interview. It obviously sounds like you're thriving, and we're super excited for the future for Media Whisperer. And can we fill our listeners in on the future of Veridia?
Yeah, so Veridia is, we just released a new album last year. Very proud of that. After a couple years of being on a few different record labels, this is our first independent release. So, you know, kind of navigating what that looks like, and having fun with that right now. So we'll be back out on the road. You can keep up with everything Veridia is up to on our website, social media, like I mentioned earlier. Thank you guys for letting me talk about that on here.
And where can our listeners find more about you?
If you check out MediaWhisper.com, you can find out more about our agency, see some of the clients that we work with. You know, we've kind of graduated out of only working in the music industry, which was a staple of our company for years. We really carved our niche in the music industry, but we've taken the lessons that we've learned on that side and been able to approach other industries with a very unique perspective. So working with boutique hotels, with festivals, just with all kinds of fun stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Brandon. Before we go, we just have one question for you that we're going to ask all of our guests.
Oh boy. Okay.
So we're obsessed with morning rituals. What is your morning ritual?
Good question. Well, I'm not a morning person, so I do the same thing every day because my brain is just not functioning for a while.
I love that you admit that you're not a morning person. Like, so many people hate to admit that.
I've tried, honestly. I wish I could be a morning person. A few times a year, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get up at 6:30 and go to the gym. It never happens. And I think, honestly, like when the band's on tour, it doesn't benefit me to be a morning person. No matter what, I'm going to be up till 1, 2 a.m. after a show. So anyway, that's a sidebar. But my morning ritual is I eat a boring bowl of cereal.
What kind?
Go Lean Crunch by Kashi. Get that protein in. There's nothing exciting about it. And generally, I'll make myself a pour-over cup of coffee at home. I take my dog for a walk, and then I get into my day.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Brandon.
We hope you enjoyed the very first episode of Killer Influence. Please feel free to leave any questions or reviews on iTunes, or follow us on Twitter at Podcast Killer, or at Killer Influence Podcast on Instagram.
Stay tuned for our next episode.
It's going to be a great one.